Are you ready for the most depressing yet most wholesome show of the winter 2024 anime season? Well, I present to you The Weakest Tamer Began a Journey to Pick Up Trash. A series that is so depressing that the ED is literally like if you were to call up a self-harm hotline and all you get is a pre-recorded message that was recorded by somebody that's not a native English speaker. It's kind of unsettling, to be honest. Yet this series is so sweet that you might actually run off to the pound and adopt a puppy. It is that kind of sweetness. Pre-scripted introduction aside, The Weakest Tamer is actually a very refreshing take on the fantasy genre, kind of seemingly showcasing how terrible society can be to somebody that is blessed with the most weakest rank ever, or technically a lack thereof, while seemingly at the same time sprinkling a little twist in the isekai genre itself. But I've completed the first 2 episodes of the series, so let's just jump right into my thoughts. The Weakest Tamer Began a Journey to Pick Up Trash opens up with Famicia, and at the time of it opening up, she's 8 years old, and she's currently being chased out by her village. Well, not chased out, they're literally trying to hunt her down. See, in this world, whenever you reach the age of 5, you're pretty much given or gifted a skill and a ranking to go along with it. Actually, there's people that have more than one skill, but yeah. Famicia was granted the Tamer skill, but she's a 0 star. Like, she has no stars to go along with it. Typically, people have like 2 star or 3 star. She has 0. Well, the village chief has deemed her as being something that will bring misfortune upon the village. And so she's being hunted down when it opens up. There's actually a bounty put out for her. They want her dead or alive. It's that brutal. Well, as she's fleeing from the village and people trying to hunt her down, we find out a few things about her. She's learned a lot of skills from this particular fortune teller to kind of survive out in the open, given a lot of books by this fortune teller, and told to go to this royal capital. She's also given a bag that is pretty much like a never-ending bag, something you could put a bunch of stuff into and it kind of, reduces the weight of it. But additionally, we find out that she's kind of special in a way that she was born with essentially the mind of another person within her, a person that has lived a previous life. The way that she kind of describes it is every now and then these memories of this other person sort of speak to her, ask her questions and inquire on things. So when she's being attacked by a bunch of little slimes and this past self starts to talk, it says like, these are so cute. And she's like, you're crazy. They're monsters. Why would I think these slimes are cute? Famicia claims that this past self, the memories of them, is kind of useless. They don't really provide much information. But yeah, despite all this, Famicia kind of accepts their new life, having to be on the run and having nothing. Through all the hardships that they've faced, they're kind of used to it at this point. But despite this, of course, every now and then it kind of weighs down upon her and kind of breaks her. Well, Famicia decides to take the advice of the fortune teller that's now unfortunately passed away and go to the royal capital. Knowing that she's being hunted down, she decides to disguise herself as a boy, cut her hair, and thanks to the advice of this past self, decides to take upon herself the name Ivy. Through her travels, eventually she ends up coming across this little slime, and she looks in her little book that was given to her by the fortune teller, and it pretty much tells her that it is like the weakest monster ever. This slime is so weak, it's the weakest of the slimes, that a simple gust or a poke can kill it. And it only lasts like a day, so there's very little research about these particular slimes. Well, Famicia kind of seeing kind of herself in the slime, and the idea that this slime is seen as the weakest and useless, herself being a no star and seen as useless, she decides to stay at the side of the slime until it passes, because again, it's only going to last a day. We'll cut forward the next day, and the slime is still alive. And kind of seeing that the book lied about this, she kind of figures, well, maybe the aspect of me not being able to tame anything is a lie too. So she tries to tame the slime, and it actually works. And thus, as she calls it, Sora becomes her first tame. And the two of them kind of travel together. Eventually we find out this slime really, really likes to eat blue potions, which is an oddity because typically only high-level slimes have the ability to disintegrate objects, but the slime only likes to eat blue potions. Eventually, she ends up coming across another village where that village, she starts to sell the meat that she's been hunting and buying bread, and she kind of wants to settle down there. Everybody there is nice. Nobody knows who she is, and she's kind of making a living and enjoying bread every day. But unfortunately, her past comes a hunter as the adventurers that were sent to try to hunt her down arrive in this village and put up a bunch of wanted posters. And she panics, thinking that these people that she's now befriended are going to turn on her, so she decides to flee. Well, as she's fleeing and she's continuing her journey to the capital, she eventually comes across this treant that has killed the 2 adventurers that she just fled from, which is kind of odd. And she gets really badly harmed. And as she's kind of losing consciousness, the slime that she has tamed starts to jump onto her wound, and she believes that this slime is going to eat her because it's still a monster. And that's pretty much where we wrap up episode 2 of The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash, a series that so far, like I said, is very, very unique and extremely depressing. I think this show, I knew based on the PVs that it's going to be kind of a rough show to watch, mainly the idea that it kind of implies a lot from her village itself. I mean, you assume, again, she was raised there for 5 years. I mean, she had a decent living, I would assume. But obviously, the point that she reached the age of 5, she has been deemed useless by society because she's a 0 star. But yeah, the oddity around this is that, yes, she's now being hunted down at the age of 8. Meaning that she possibly was in the village for another 3 years, but unfortunately being seen as useless. So you'd assume at this point the family probably started treating her terribly, maybe the village itself. My assumption is this is probably the point in which this fortune teller that she kind of sees positively to, maybe have found her. My assumption is that the fortune teller possibly seen of obviously Famicia's future and the idea that eventually she's going to be hunted down by this entire village and was trying to prepare her, because this fortune teller bestowed upon her a bunch of information. Again, all these books, how to survive, this bag that she's going to eventually need. I think this fortune teller knew that eventually Famicia was going to be hunted down, and she was equipping her with the things she needs in order to survive. I'll be curious to see if it's a possibility this fortune teller is somehow tied in also with the aspect of the isekai, which again, like I said earlier, is a very interesting twist to the whole isekai thing. And I love this, actually. I kind of had this feeling with Spirit Chronicles. I wanted this with Spirit Chronicles, honestly. With Spirit Chronicles, it has this idea of somebody being placed inside of another body, but every now and then the other body, the current self in there, sort of takes control. And I'm kind of getting that just here, and it actually play out. And the idea that Famicia is Famicia. Ivy is Ivy. She is who she is. She's always in the mindset of a person that is born and raised in that world. She's not the isekai. The isekai is like this batch of knowledge and this other self within her that is communicating to her. And it's never vocalized. That's the oddity about it. It's never vocalized. You never hear some other person's voice like, oh my gosh, this is just like in Japan where you get the rice balls and stuff like that. No, it's just somebody every now and then speaking to her in her mind, and she will respond to it. And it doesn't vocalize it. So Ivy will be traveling around and then suddenly go, oh, you're asking why I think they're not cute? She's responding to it, but we're not hearing it. And I'm very curious how that's going to really apply anything to the story other than that was sort of a gist of this other self sort of trying to instill somewhat of help for Ivy in her struggles, but not really. I'm very curious exactly what it's going to apply. My only assumption is that this other self, maybe possibly from our modern times world, it hasn't really established what age or what world this other person's from. It could be a Japanese person that's inside of Famicia. It could be another completely different world. It still hasn't applied any knowledge to it. And even Famicia herself, I'm jumping back and forth between Famicia and Ivy. Ivy herself constantly believes that whatever is being given to her by this other self is useless. No information they've been given is useful. I'm assuming eventually maybe giving Ivy some sort of information of modern technologies that she can use in order to get a leg up. Maybe some sort of mature problem solving that might help Ivy get a little bit of a leg up. I'm not sure. So far, it's kind of almost like she puts it, why is this here? It kind of makes you wonder, like, why is this even a thing in the story when it doesn't seem like it's really applying anything? But we'll see. And again, it could also be an aspect of maybe there's a lot of the exchanges between that, the isekai and Ivy. Maybe a lot of it's being cut from the light novel to the adaptation. But we'll see as it goes along. But for now, it's just kind of like a few passing comments about slimes and giving her the idea for Ivy as her name, this weed that has been stepped on that still thrives, which, yes, is very fitting to her current life. But yeah, that's the way that's going so far. Now, I think the more interesting thing that's so far happening with the story, because we have the isekai aspect, which again is a common theme. We have the fantasy genre, obviously. We have the weakest of the weak. We have that trope in the story. But like I said, I think so far it's doing very well. And the idea that typically with the weakest, I'm the weakest, but yet I'm the most OP type of stories, it very quickly shifts to the I'm OP and everybody goes Sugoi. This one so far is brutally bad with it, and the idea that, yes, this girl is being hunted down, and she trusts nobody. And it's kind of a sad thing that the moment she arrives at the other village, she is very afraid of everybody, but eventually she opens up to them. Eventually they call out to her and they say, what's going on? Oh, okay, that's what you want to do? Sure, buy this. Or, hey, yeah, I'll buy that stuff. She's very timid at first because she's not used to interacting with people that are not trying to kill her. And so she gets comfortable. And it sucks in the idea that the moment that these two guys show up, she immediately thinks these people are going to turn on her. So she's got to get out of there. But I'm curious at what point that's probably going to change. We're already kind of showing signs that she has tamed this very, very weak slime. And the assumption is that because even though that she's a 0 star, maybe she can tame a really weak monster. The knowledge that she was given is the idea that with 0 stars, she can't even tame animals, let alone monsters, which suggests that monsters require more stars. The idea that she has tamed a monster, even if it is the weakest, makes me believe that what if this is going to be one of those cases where maybe society itself does not understand what a 0 star is? So the interesting thing that came from very early on was I'm guessing it was the chief, somebody saying she will bring misfortune to the village. No stars cannot exist. So my assumption there is that it could be the idea that she can't exist because she will taint the village. Like if somebody gets with her and they have children, those will be 0 stars too. She's too weak that we can't let her commingle. That could possibly be. It could just be an aspect of having somebody weak around is going to cause misfortune. I'm wondering if it's more of an aspect that society itself just doesn't understand what a no star is. And in actuality, it's just kind of such a rarity that people don't understand how it works. It's kind of like the slime. It's a rarity that nobody understands how it works. And so it could be an aspect that maybe a 0 star is extremely OP. So I'm kind of assuming that's the direction it's going to go, that Famicia Ivy is actually really powerful. It's just understanding how it exactly works. Or it could be an aspect of it, she has so many stars it doesn't register. Who knows? It hasn't really indicated exactly what the process is to discovering what your rank is. Is it something like an orb you put your hand on and it shows the stars or whatever? That's all going to be the curious stuff going forward. But I think all that stuff aside, all my speculation around the mechanics and the isekai and the slime and all that kind of stuff aside, so far, what I've loved so much about this show is twofold. One, it's very beautiful. This is a very beautifully done show, and I don't even think I remember what studio Mesquite was. It's a relatively new studio, if I remember correctly, but they're doing a fantastic job. This show looks really beautiful. Now, there is some shots that look a little bit awkward, like there's one shot where she's kind of running towards the screen, and it just looks a little bit off, but for the most part, it's very, very vibrant, very well animated, and it's kind of one of those shows where it's like, who is doing this? Because this looks like it has way too much budget in it. It's a very beautiful show, and I'm loving every minute for that. It's grabbing the character, the expressions, the difficulties that she's facing. The perspective shots add so much to the mood and the troubles that she's kind of going through. It's kind of one of those shows where everything's kind of on point. It's not like stellar directing, but it's incredibly good directing. And other than that, yes, I think Ivy's story so far is being portrayed very well. Now, granted, it kind of just jumps right into it, kind of just throws you into it, and her just immediately fleeing, and you're not quite sure exactly what's going on. But it does well enough to kind of piecemeal the story to you as it goes along. It isn't really until she is kind of divulging her life to the slime and relating to the slime a lot that you get like a broader picture that's kind of divulged to the slime. It's showing again that kind of relatability that she's having to the slime and the idea that society itself has rejected her. And I think it's in that kind of, yes, very depressing story that we're getting of Ivy that we're getting a sense of a more deeper plot line that I think is a very positive message. This is a story about somebody that has been rejected by society, but finding the positive out of it. That finding, despite being pushed out by society, there is still purpose in it. She quotes this other self that's within her in saying, if she complains too much about how she was born, nothing will ever start for her. This idea that if she sits still for so long, if she keeps complaining about what she's going through, she's always going to be stuck there. Instead, pushing her forward, pushing her into her next life, her opportunities that are in front of her, which based on the fact that when she arrives at the second village, it kind of looks like that's an option. If people don't know who she is, she has the option of being able to experience something new. Another great quote in it is the idea of not knowing what the future holds, and how even though everybody else has purpose, having no purpose is actually easier. And the idea that Yes, I think it notes the fact that her father, one of the skills that he had is a carpenter. Everything in your life is pretty much decided by what skills you're given. So yes, her father, at age 5, assumingly, he got the carpenter skill. Immediately, he was going to become a carpenter. Yes, Ivy did get Tamer, but society, in accepting her if she had stars, she would be a Tamer. But instead, since she has been rejected by society, and that she has no predestined purpose, she is able to have the entire world before her opened up. So it's kind of getting the aspect of society pushing those expectations upon you, but yet for her, with no expectations upon her, she's still able to find some sort of purpose that she can create herself. Again, even though it's kind of a hard kind of show to watch, in the idea of this poor little 8-year-old that's just being treated terribly, hunted down, again, dead or alive, she's able to create her own happiness. And yes, that's partly in thanks to the idea of, again, finding Sora, having this other self that's within her that's talking to her every now and then. It's been very sweet in that regard, and it's kind of one of those shows where the entire time you're just kind of going, I just want her happiness for this girl. But yeah, it doesn't really hold much back when it comes to her survivability itself, because again, she's having to learn a lot of things on how to survive, scrounge for materials, scrounge for, potions that she needs to use. And yes, technically the dangers that are kind of surrounding her. Having this one point where you have this big horde of giant ants that are coming by that she has to hide from. And yes, technically at the very end of the second episode, being attacked by a nasty tree haunt. Which, yes, we can all assume, yes, based on the fact that this slime only eats blue potions, and again, blue potions are what heals people. If it only eats blue potions, my assumption is that it's trying to heal her wound. So I'm guessing maybe its blood is able to heal wounds. So if she's got this really nasty wound on her hand and it's jumping on it, it's probably trying to heal it. I am kind of curious what this widespread hatred is for no stars is going to be. If it's going to be an aspect of maybe, yes, society itself deems no stars as dangerous, or if it's just going to be simply a thing of, yes, there's an unspoken rule for the leaderships of all these towns that if you do see a no star, you have to get rid of them. Maybe the kingdom itself does not want no stars around. I'll be curious to see how, because again, like with those adventurers are like, I think this chief is overreacting. It's not that big of a deal, but they said dead or alive, so we gotta go get her. He's kind of playing it up a little bit too much kind of thing. So it doesn't seem like that is something that even the adventurers want to do. Overall, I think the show has like the potential of being the gem of the season. It is the show that it's seemingly based on popularity charts on all the sites, isn't doing that too well. I kind of assumed based on the previews when we were coming into this season that this probably wouldn't be a show that many people are going to pay attention to. But I think it has everything in place that this could be an extremely emotional show, depending on how it plays everything out. But anyhow, that's my thoughts on the series so far. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment. Let me know if you think of the series so far, if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate it, but it does. And y'all take care.